right, so chat, I told you guys I wanted to get on here and I wanted to talk about DNF Duel, man, because I've been seeing a lot of comments when I play the game and stuff are talking about, like, you know, how dead the game is, or bringing up the Steam charts, and not really that many people playing the game. And some people, you know, just some of it a little bit troll. Some people are just like actually empathetic about the game situation and stuff like that. But I just really want to talk about what led to the downfall of DNF Duel. Now, if you know, there's the huge patch coming out soon that's going to have the balance update along with Spectre. And of course, I think there's been hints that people have been talking about of other characters also coming in the game based on the actual posts from the Twitter accounts, which you'll get into Twitter accounts in just a minute. But talking about what led to the early downfall of DNF Duel, I think there's a couple of things here. But yeah, the game's been talked about positively lately because of the actual stuff that's coming soon, and hopefully this can help the game maintain more people playing it. You know, just maintain a consistent player base is something that the game actually needs right now. The game definitely needs some sort of consistency as far as its player base, rather than the dwindling numbers that we constantly see so far. So hopefully with the balance update, it shakes the meta of what characters people see on the screen a little bit more, even though, you know, when you look at these top 8, they're pretty diverse. But of course, people just want to see more things, probably see, you know, probably some characters that get a little bit more or less under represented, like probably like some launchers or like some grapplers in top 8. You see grapple a little bit, probably like Lost Warrior, even though we just saw Lost Warrior, but you know, you really don't see that character too much. And a few other characters that you probably don't see that much. You know, people want to see a shake up in like sort of like the meta of like the characters you see majority of the time on the screen when it comes to these tournaments. So we're going to talk about the early downfall of DNF. We got to start at the very beginning. When this game first released, there was no real announcements for the future of this game. You know, there was no DLC announcements for this game. And unfortunately, in this sort of environment that we are in the FGC, we are sort of we expect to see some sort of announcements for the future of the game, some sort of like at least a roadmap or some DLC, some battle pass, or something that we can buy, some season pass that we can buy in advance to know that there is a future for this game. And that's just something that just wasn't there. There was very little word from the developers when it came to stuff like that. You know, there was a lack of that sort of communication between the supporters and the developers when it came to exactly what was going on. Of course, there's some other contributors there as well. Of course, this IP being not the biggest here, I feel like, in the States for sure, and probably not that big outside of like Korea, because it's definitely a Korean MMO game, very popular over there. Now, there's some people that actually know and played this game and heard about it and stuff like that, but this is not really a big IP over here. So, you know, they probably weren't expecting too much from this side, but that also led to another big downfall, which we're going to talk about, which was the marketing for this game. The marketing for DNF Duel left a lot to be desired for because of how they actually did it. So if you don't know, they have their Twitter account and then they had their YouTube. So we got an announcement for the game just randomly, and we didn't hear anything about it for a year. And then a year later, they resurged with another trailer saying, hey, this game basically still being worked on, showcasing, you know, the characters once again. We got the beta and stuff like that. But when you notice things on the Twitter, a lot of it was basically Korean. And then we were like almost like a second-class citizen when it came to the knowledge about the game. We weren't really properly addressed, and usually they were using ArcSys as the second tell to basically let us get the information that we needed about the game. A lot of the stuff on their Twitter was basically in Korean, and the only way to get the information in English was either by ArcSys or in their community posts by YouTube. And you know, a lot of people don't just randomly go through the community post section on a YouTube page, or sometimes you may miss it because it's just not there. You know, the marketing for this game was very different compared to when you think of a game like Guilty Gear Strive, right, where there's big marketings as far as like how they do things. You know, they got the hashtags like everywhere that they try to do things. They got the VTubers involved in for the game for the beta and stuff, you know. And this game probably had like a very smaller budget, so they probably couldn't afford some of the things, but some of this stuff, you know, you could definitely do. Like, there's been like multiple sales for this game that have happened that I don't really see them talk about that much. I know ArcSys has done. There's actually a trial for the game on PlayStation Plus that you can have, I think it's 2 hours. Is it 2 hours, chat? You could do like 2 hours for the game, and nobody really, like, they don't really talk about that like that. Like, there's just a lot of things that they really didn't promote for this game that could have helped either sales wise or retention wise and stuff like that, that just was not there. Now, this next thing I got to put in here, because I was gaslighted for saying this before, but of course it comes back to pass, right? So the lack of content in this game, man, I feel like is definitely a contributing factor. The lack of content, and we're going to talk about the character balancing in just a second, but the lack of content, this game doesn't have that much stuff inside of it, man. It's just the single player mode. You have like a time trial, like trial mode or something like that. Is it time trial or like survival mode? And then there is just online, right? So there's really not much there. The single player mode is just like the stories. If you don't care about the stories, you sort of just did one just to unlock Lost Warrior, and that was pretty much it. So there's really not much there. I always stress, and like I said, I made a video about this talking about why certain fighting games do not do well, and I was talking about how these fighting games need to have better packages when it comes to the content in it. You look like a game like Street Fighter 5. That is a good package. Look at what you're getting for Street Fighter 5 right now. You're going to be able to play old Street Fighter type games like Street Fighter 2 and stuff like that. They got game modes inside of the game mode. So like they have like the danger modes or whatever. I forget exactly what they're called, where like, you know, there's bulls running at you and stuff like that. Like these little mini game modes inside of the actual game. You got the customization and the whole lobby and communication system with the lobby stuff and all that. Like, and then there's the full single player mode experience that we haven't even got to like visually or actually get to play ourselves yet. So, you know, you got that along with everything else that's possibly coming to the game as well. There's just a lot there for the complete full package of the game. Now, of course, DNF Duel was only $50 when it came out, but still for the packages you're getting, the game really wasn't worth the price point, man. It really was not worth it. And of course, there was some regional price things as well. People were talking about where the game was like much higher in other places around the world, but the game has multiple sales now, so probably that's not really going to be like the contributing factor now. But I guess if you weren't going to play the game then and then you heard the bad word of mouth back then you're probably not going to play the game now, right? So if the word of mouth was good back then and then the sales happened, then probably things would be different, but it definitely wasn't. And I'm talking about the character balancing for DNF Duel. Obviously, this game was developed to be a high character power level game, and the characters are absolutely nuts in this game as far as the things they could do. But of course, when this game first came out, there were definitely some characters that were slightly above the rest. We're talking about Swiftmaster, we're talking about Hitman, and like, you know, the crazy things they was able to do. Striker as well with the infinite stuff like that, the block string infinite. But they did tone some of that stuff down, but probably a little too late, right? People got tired of seeing these characters and they were just very, very strong and they weren't that difficult to use. Now, this game is definitely on one of the more easier sides to play. There's definitely stuff people are still figuring out about the game, but at the level at the current time, those strategies that people were using were strong enough to where people got tired of the game really, really quickly, right? Like these characters were ridiculously strong. Yes, there were things you could do to try to combat them, but it was difficult to actually get those strategies going and to try to implement them inside your game plan. Like some of these characters just didn't have a good time doing it. You look at characters like Lost Warrior or Launcher or Grappler versus some of these characters when they were at their peak. It was a hard time for some of these characters, man. And you know, even though some of these characters were definitely okay in their own regard, like Berserker and say like Kunoichi versus the top three that you've seen all the time, it was just hard to get around these. Some of them have some decent matchups and stuff like that, but it was just, you know, you're gonna fight a gauntlet of these characters because of how easy this game is to play compared to like some other games. And honestly, I think the other thing that left a sour taste in people's mouth was the fact that this patch that we got, the initial patch, was hinted at to be like some big revolution changing patch for the game, and basically it just touched like 3 characters, right? It was just like some slap on the wrist for 2 of them, Hitman and Striker, and you know, Swiftmaster got touched actually a little bit, but there was no like real big changes. People thought this was going to be a patch that was going to shake the meta of the game for real. Like, you know, there's going to be some launcher buffs, some Vanguard buffs, some Lost Warrior buffs, and like tone down some of these other characters and make the game try to be as evenly as possible, you know, as all balances try to do at the very least. That was not the case, man. So a lot of people were disappointed, and basically their characters were the same. People were hoping for some new things, because when you talk about patches, people, even though people want to see some characters get nerfed, they also want new tools to discover with their characters. You know, a lot of people felt like because this game is pretty simple that it was pretty much figured out, even though like I said, people do find a lot of things with some of these characters a lot more. Like I've been seeing a lot more like, you know, Berserker stuff, and there's like a lot more like, you know, Striker optimizations and stuff I've been seeing going around, and a few other characters and stuff like that, few Kunoichi setups and stuff. So there is other things that people obviously are going to find over time, but for the majority of the part, these other characters, regardless of the tech, were still in the placings that they were. I think that about cover everything, right, chat? I think we talked about like mainly the most biggest points that was there. Hopefully this is different now. Hopefully we now start to get this communication. If you don't know, we actually created a separate Twitter account that is dedicated to the English audience now, so we're finally being spoken to. You know, they've been asking for community feedback and stuff, and I think that's how the Twitter even got started. So they are trying to basically have this communication with us, with the other audiences besides the Korean audiences. They are trying to be more transparent with how the development of this game is going, and hopefully we just have more communication with the developers, and hopefully the marketing for this game gets better over time. And hopefully, like I said, we may not get much more players, but as long as when stuff happens and people come back to the game, we can retain those players for much longer. That's all we can hope for at this point, and hopefully that is enough to keep this game going for a decent amount of time. I mean, it is an Arc Revo game. There is $100,000 on the lawn, and not that many people are playing it, which is crazy to me to think about. But hopefully this gets more people on the game, man, and hopefully we just see a better future for DNF. But anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, man, let me know down in the comments below how you guys feel about the early decline of DNF Duel. What do you think was the biggest contributing factor of that? I want to hear what your guys' opinions are down in the comments below. Anyway, if you like anything I had to say, drop me a like. I really appreciate it. And if you want more from me, follow my socials. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn notifications so you know the next video goes live. As always, my name is Dyken, and I'll see you next time. Signing out.